Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. I'm Paul, your host, and today I'm joined with a person with a very unusual name, Shim the Gut Intuition, even. Yeah, that's a really interesting surname you got there, Shim. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Paul?
I'm splendiferous, thank you. Now, of course, I know that's not your surname. It's just the handle you've got. So tell me, what is the gut intuition? Let's kind of start with there.
Gut intuition. It's a brilliant creation of mine that I set up 2 years ago, and it's all to do with looking at our brain health and looking at our gut health and combining the two together to really get into the root problems of some of these physical problems that people go through. So, for me, it was really important to combine physical health to emotional health and mental health because that is what matters. That's what it takes to get to true health. So.
Right now, you didn't wake up one morning, did you? And go, oh, look, I'm going to call myself the Gut Intuition. Have this program. What led you to create this thing? How did you get there?
Funny enough, I was actually going through my own gut problems at the time. By trade, I'm a sports therapist, and my very first business was nothing to do with gut health. It was all to do with ligaments, nerves, tendons, bones, sports injuries. I did that for 6 years, and I let that business go because it wasn't a passion of mine. And I spent most of 2018 just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, and I just took a bit of a break. But actually, I realized, gosh, my health was in bits. I was literally going through a lot of issues with my stomach, my joints, and pain coming out of nowhere. And actually, I found this whole process, yes, uncomfortable because I had to make all these changes, but at the same time, it inspired me. I was like, hang on a minute, I can think clearly, I can focus clearly, I'm making better decisions. Is this to do with just my mindset, or actually am I making all these changes inside of my body, like the biochemistry side of it? And while I was clearing out this gut infection that I had at the time, I was just like, do you know what? I really feel strongly about this. And this is where the word intuition comes in. And I was like, I don't care what people are thinking, because part of my ego was like, what will people say? You've gone from sports therapy to gut health. Like, what makes you the expert? What qualifies you? I was like, yeah, I could see that conversation going on in my head. But at the same time, I'm like, do you know what? This feels right to me, and I'm going through this journey, and I really feel to my core that this is so important, not just to look at the physical, but the emotional and mental. And I made a decision quite quickly, and but before Christmas turned up, I'd already registered the company. It was all accepted. And then for the first 6 months of the gut intuition, I just kind of just got the feel for, what was, how I wanted it to look like, feel like, what kind of people that I wanted to help with. And at the same time, I was still learning about my own gut journey as well, and everything to do with that. And it's been a phenomenal, fascinating journey.
So I guess my question is, what brought this on? Was it the stress from work, the fact that you didn't enjoy your work, or being a sports therapist is very much standing up all day, hands on? I don't want to use the word physical labor, but it's physically intense. So
Yeah.
was it a combination of things? What actually brought on this illness? If you
All of it. It was basically my job previously was running a clinic. So not only was I a sports therapist, but I was a business owner as well. So it was like, okay, I've got to wear all these hats. I've got to do the marketing. I've got to do the business mentoring. I've got to make sure that my mindset's on the right hat. I've got to make sure my finances in order. I've got to make sure all my receipts and everything. You can imagine all the stress that comes with it. And then on top of that, looking after my clients. So the first 3 years, it was just me running the business.
hmm
And I kept myself as fit as I could because where I was based was in a gym. So I was always kind of on the go. I was always switched on. Now it has its benefits, of course, but then it got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm not seeing the rewards of my efforts here, like financially, because I was doing so much. I was like, what is going on in here? Like, I feel as if I'm focusing, but maybe I'm not. And I realized that, later on down the line, I was like, I've actually hit burnout quite a number of times, and I didn't really pay attention to what my body was actually saying at the time. And for me, like, awareness was a big step forward, because without it, which direction do you go into? You can either just carry on as normal or just hit and hope for the best. And then obviously, as time went on in the first business, I actually got a team. So I was able to delegate a bit better. I was able to let go of control a little bit more. So yes, that helped, but me and my brain, I wanted to expand. And not only that, I traveled doing what I was doing at the time. So I was doing sort of cycling events abroad, like in France, in Germany. So, not only was the clinic running here in London, but then at the same time, I didn't stop. I was going abroad to do all the work, and then come to the 6 year point, I was like, I feel exhausted, not just on a physical level, but emotionally and mentally. I was like, do I really want to do this anymore? This doesn't light me up anymore. And that was also a stressful point, because I'm like, well, what the hell do I do next? Sports therapy is all I knew. I spent 5 years at university learning about this stuff, and then kind of doing a bit of gym work here and there before I actually went off and did my own thing. So, and then not to mention all this personal stuff that comes with it as well. This is just business, but things at home weren't always great. And a collection of everything, all the stresses, kind of just got under my skin, literally. And that's where the gut problems started.
And once you realize that this has happened, did you kind of like just kill your business straight away, or did you kind of like soldier on regardless for a while until you realize, this is just it, I can't do it anymore?
Do you know what? I soldier on for a while. I was like, do you know what? I'm not the type of person to give up. I'm gonna keep going, and I'm just gonna figure some things out. I'm gonna process and get a feel for whether this is true for me or not. Because, I built this business from scratch. So I didn't really want to 100% let it go completely. It wasn't like I was working for someone, I was working for myself. And plus, I had a team. So it's like they were very happy there. And I was very happy there, in a sense that I built something from the ground up. But in the end, you just can't lie to yourself, Paul, anymore. Like it's, you can't sleep. You think about it 24/7. You're like, something has to change. You have to let go in order to move forward in some
Mm.
way, shape, or form. So yeah, I took a time, but then it was just like, yeah, let Christmas go. And then January came, and I was like, yeah, new year, new start. So I'm gonna let it go.
I think that's one decision that a lot of people either never make or leave it until it's way too late. The
Yeah.
the decision that actually this isn't working for me. I'm doing 90 hours a week. I'm not getting anything back from it. It's leaving me exhausted, fatigued, tired, whatever. So many people get kind of stuck in that situation. And you actually were really good because you took a step back and went, you know what, this is making me ill, it's not working, I've got to do something. And you actually took action, whereas a lot of people wouldn't have done that.
Yeah. Yeah, but that wasn't always the case, Paul. In all my first part of my business journey, if I reflect back and really think, what were the key signs that were popping up that I just completely ignored and pushed through? And this is what a lot of people tend to do. I'm just going to push through. I've got a 12-hour day. I'm going to push through. And I used to do that. I get Facebook reminders all the time where what I was doing 5 years ago. Did a 15-hour day. Well done, me. And while that's good, well, positive in a way that you've been quite productive and busy, but at the same time, you pay a price. You sacrifice a lot with your health with it. So it wasn't always the case, and I don't think it's something that you get straight away. I think you have to go through the pain sometimes in understanding, like, I don't want to feel that again, so I'm going to take a different approach. Some people don't move from that sort of painful state at all, and they still expect a different result all the time
Mm.
with their health, with their business. So
Yeah, I think that one word that's been coming up in my world recently is the word intuition. And I think a
yeah,
lot of people, particularly in business, don't listen to what you want to call it, a gut feeling or this sense that comes along that their body goes, listen, Paul, that's enough. We've had it now. We don't want to play. Go do something else. And like you say, people ignore that. They put the blinkers on and they push through to their own detriment. And then we get all of these niggles and these inflammations and these problems, and that shoulder injury that I got when I was 12 suddenly starts coming back, and the body's going, look, I'm sending you all these messages, bloody well pack it in. But we
Yeah.
just ignore it. Why do you think people ignore all the messages that their bodies actually do send and say, look, it's time to quit now?
I think a lot of it's to do with things we've been listening to from a young age. People that we've looked up to, society, media, how other people do it. So how we compare ourselves to other people. And it's like, yeah, I'm just going to do this, rather than knowing that actually intuition is something you're born with, and there's some science backing that up as well. If we want to go more down the sort of the vagus nerve route and how it's connected to the gut brain, but intuition isn't something you should ignore. But I think it gets suppressed a lot. And I think it gets suppressed in a way, the foods that we eat, how we interact with people, even the types of people that generally not great for us in terms of, maybe not support us, quite negative. But it's really important and paramount to know that, like, who am I in a sense? And, you know, when my intuition's playing for me, when it's there, how do I know that? Because it's different for everyone else. Some people might say, oh, it's just a gut feeling, or I may feel a tingle here and there. It's just signs. Like you said, they're messages from the body. Symptoms that we experience are just messages from the body. It's nothing to be scared of. What's scary is that you don't listen to it and the knocks just get louder on the door every single time. So intuition is definitely a natural skill we all have that needs to be used, like we need to nurture it like a muscle. So
That's a really good point. So I just want to take you back a second. First of all, you said about the vagus nerve and the links it has in the body. Can you give us a quick kind of layman's guide to what the vagus nerve is and what the vagus nerve is? I told you I can muffle my words sometimes. I'll say it for the third time. What is the vagus nerve and what does it do? There you go. And how that impacts on the body. And the second thing is, you said about foods and people and other things can actually suppress the intuition. Now, I've not heard that before. So can you kind
yeah.
of elaborate on those two things for us?
Yeah, sure. So the vagus nerve is basically how like to call it a long communication center. It's got about 100 million cells, and it's embedded around the gut and then kind of goes all the way up to the brain. And it not in the brain, but towards a part of the central nervous system. So it's about 100 million cells that kind of send all the signals, all the messages from the gut to the brain. So, for example, if the gut is feeling a bit off, you're gonna may experience a headache, as an example, or you may experience an imbalance of foggy brain, or if you've got a good amount of serotonin is like your happy hormone. 95% of serotonin is in your gut. Those messages will be fed up to the brain, and where you feel sort of that happiness, that happy hormone. So again, it's really, really important that we nurture that. We feed our bodies in the right way to fuel our brains in the right way. If we're eating, let's say we're eating a diet with a lot of gluten, with a lot of processed food, a lot of refined sugar, for example, we could take a guess how we're going to be feeling on a day-to-day basis. We could feel sluggish. Our decision making may be a bit slow, a bit poor, or none at all. We may be missing signs and opportunities that could level us up personally as well as in our business, and so on. And even our momentum, our productivity on a day to day basis our performance can go down if we're not feeding our bodies in the way it needs to be fed in order to just function on a normal basis. So, in a way, that sluggishness, that kind of feeding system that takes over, that kind of overrides intuition altogether, because we're not really using our intuition. There's something that I call, intuitive cooking. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, really kind of, that's a good way of practicing your intuition, actually, is not really focusing on the recipe step by step, but looking at the sauce that you're making, for example, and going, okay, taste, yeah, that's good, that's good enough for me. And you try it out, and I've really, really tried it out, and it works every single time. There's intuitive cooking as well. There's intuitive thinking, there's intuitive feeling. So it's always there, it's all around us. But it does, we tend to sort of push it away, we tend to suppress it when we're not kind of feeding our body or our brains in a more mental state the way we need to thrive on.
I was smiling there because when you talked about intuitive cooking, I've got this
Yeah.
mix which is 50-50 curry powder and 50-50 turmeric. And my intuition says always add some more, spice it up a bit.
Yeah.
So that's the vagus nerve. I get that about kind of the food suppressing mood because yeah, I mean, if you eat too much, Christmas Day, what happens on Christmas Day if you're into that kind of thing? You have a big Christmas meal at 3 o'clock. You eat way too much. Everybody does, yeah. Well, not everybody. The majority of people eat way too much. And then you spend the rest of the afternoon going, "What
Yeah.
did somebody speak?" And then you get that feeling that you're just completely overstuffed and full and can't move, and your brain
Yeah.
turns to mush.
Yeah. It's a lot for the gut and the brain to process in one go. Not to mention the cakes and the desserts and the alcohol and everything. It's like, okay, we've got a lot to process on this day. Forgot this day was coming. This is how I think that everything talks inside of us. But let's say it wasn't Christmas Day. Let's say it was a normal working day for someone that just does horrendous hours day in, day out,
Mhm.
no real break that they take, quite stressed out in their body as well as in their job or their career. And it's like that every day for them, where it comes 9, 10 o'clock, they've just left the office. It's like, I'm starving, let's just get a takeout. And then they just consume everything because they literally have not managed their state of energy and their state of time throughout the whole day, because there's an imbalance of how they're looking after themselves and what their job or their career or their business is looking like as
Mm.
well. And it's a lot of people think, oh no, I just need to manage my time, and I'm like, you're completely wrong, because it's not managing your time, it's managing your energy first.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because
Right.
I've noticed that if I eat over a certain time, then I don't sleep because the body's supposed to be resting at night when you're
Yeah.
asleep. But if you eat a meal at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, then it's not resting because the digestion is kicking in, trying to get rid of all that stuff you just guzzled down your neck.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I educate a lot of our clients on, which is your circadian rhythm. And every organ in your body has a clock of its own. It's a biological clock, it's a natural clock we have. And it has certain times to process or release toxins or do whatever it needs to do at different times of the day. That's why meal times and the amount that you eat is so, so important. And what time you get up in the morning and what time you actually go to bed is really, really important. Not only is that important for, say, managing your productivity, but it's all to do with production of energy, hormones, your body's state of mind and your mind as well in that aspect. So, so important, but it's so overlooked. It's like, no, I'm just going to push through. I'll work till midnight tonight so I don't have to do it tomorrow. But it comes at a price.
Oh
Is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
usually
It always
a lot of
comes at a
them.
price.
Yeah.
I've been reading that sort of science is starting to call the gut, the whole kind of aspect of digestion, everything, the second brain. So, first of all, do you agree with that as calling the gut the second brain? And if it is the brain, does it kind of think as we think our brains think? That makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean, because obviously typically we think brain here, but I feel as if the digestive system is a different kind of brain. And maybe we don't want to call it brain, maybe we want to give it another name. But because I know people can associate with a brain as an
Yeah.
example. But um this goes back to what I was talking about, the vagus nerve as an example. That's a whole fascinating communication center, as I explained. But the digestive system as an overall, the gut, when it works really, really well, is actually very independent. It doesn't rely on any other system that much. whereas other systems tend to talk to each other a lot. The gut does, but it doesn't need help from the brain as much,
Hmm.
and it kind of works entirely on its own. The issue is that when it goes out of balance, so out of balance may look like bloating, stomach cramps, infections, parasites, candida overgrowth. It could be acid reflux, all of those things, IBS. That's when the digestive system's out of balance. When it's out of balance, this is where the other organs in the body, like liver, like the gallbladder, like the large small intestine, the stomach, all of those things, pancreas, will start to work harder for whatever's going on in the digestive system.
Right,
Because,
gotcha.
for example, if there's too much going on in the small intestine, large intestine as an example, then that often goes into the bloodstream. And then the bloodstream gets fed into the liver, and then the liver's like, okay, I'm going to have to process all of this as well as do the stuff that I need to do in the middle of the night when it does it. Because, for example, the liver is usually between 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning, is where it needs to do its detoxification processes and all those lovely things that it does to keep us alive every single day. But imagine this, late nights, parties, all of those things, alcohol, sugar, Netflix binges. You can see how much just doing that can put the digestive system out of balance, out of sync, which means all the other systems around the clock will start to go like this, out of balance. So, although it's horrendous, sounds horrendous that, something as little as staying up late throughout the week or eating this late or whatever is, not great, but just goes to show that we can actually get it back to balance if we know where we need to self-correct some parts of this. That's why there are many ways we can help ourselves in order to, master our gut health, to master our health overall.
I've got a question for you. Now, a lot of people don't have a choice. They have to work long hours. Like, say,
Sure.
people in the medical profession, people that are
Yeah.
working shifts in factories, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What can they do, or is there anything they can do to kind of work with the gut to make it as healthy as you possibly can, given that you work in
Yeah.
those long hours?
Absolutely. So some of the key things for particularly people that worked like long hours, long shifts, even while everyone's asleep, they're working kind of
Mm.
shifts. It's really important, first and foremost, is to stick to the circadian rhythm of when you wake up to when you go to bed as much as possible, even on your days off. Because that you just need to make sure that you self-correct as much as possible. Number two is making sure your diet is full of good quality protein and good quality vegetables and carbs, all of those things, because that's going to help you stabilize your blood sugars a lot more. And obviously, with blood sugars and sugars in general, we want to keep it as less refined as possible. Because I know for a fact when you've worked long hours, the one thing you don't want to think about is a salad. And the one thing you want to go is a quick fix. And you're like, oh, a can of Coke, a fag, and a bar of chocolate. And I'm not judging anyone here, but what I'm saying is once in a while it's okay. But what I'm saying is that when that happens a lot, the work suffers. You suffer as a result of it. So if we can 80% of the time stick to those rules that work for the body with our sleep, with our food, even timings of our meals and so on, we can still come out of it quite successfully. I know 20% of it may be that at the weekend we might want to chill with our friends, we might want to grab a takeaway and so on, and or have a little treat here and there. But most of the time it's the other way around, where 80% of people's week are just out of the window,
Mm.
food wise, drink wise, sleep wise. And then at the weekend, they're like, yeah, I'm going to go to bed early this one day out the whole week. Again, the time, it's just an imbalance. That's why I always like to work with the 80-20 rules. Like, just make sure 80% of your week, if you know out of the whole week, you've got long shifts and you've got long days, prepare. Don't plan to fail. If you know that's coming up, be a bit sensible about it and go, okay, I'm going to make sure that I do a food shop on this day to make sure at least the first 3 days of my week are spot on. So I've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner sorted. It's just being a bit sensible about it. That's all.
Batch cooking is a good thing, isn't it? Because if you,
Batch
like you
cooking.
say, if you don't get home till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, the last thing you want to do is cook. Whereas if you've prepared something and all you've got to do is kind of reheat it and maybe quickly
Yeah.
chuck a salad together, you've
Yeah.
actually got a sustainable meal rather than getting fish and chips. And I love fish and chips, yeah, but I
Yeah. Yeah.
couldn't eat it every night.
No,
But
no.
the problem is, if you come home from work at 8 o'clock and you're knackered and you walk past the chippy, it's just so easy to walk in there and order something. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, it's filling and it makes you feel full, but again, it's not the most balanced, nutritious meal that you could have if you had the choice.
It's not, but let's say you do that once in a while. That's not going to be horrendous because
Exactly.
80% of your time, 80% of your week, your month is on a pretty good level for you and your body. So it's like, if you like people, I have clients that go, oh no, I had a piece of I eat too much chocolate, and I'm like, well, how much? Tell me, is it like tons and tons every day? Oh no, I had like a bar of chocolate a couple of days ago. I went, then let's put this into perspective here. It's like, technically you're not eating a lot of chocolate because you'd have to be eating so much of it that you could be physically sick, and then you have an addiction to chocolate for whatever reason. But some people sometimes really play out quite loudly here, but they don't look at the actual facts. They don't, let's say, use a way of tracking their meals, for example, and looking at overall, I've not done too bad, although I felt a little bit guilty of this meal that I had, but spread it out over the course of the week, I've done pretty well. And I think a lot of the mistakes, a lot of the guilt often comes into when people don't track and measure. So,
No, no, I was about to say something. It's really bizarre how we pick out the negative over the positive. Using your example, so I've eaten well all week,
yeah,
but I had a Snickers bar on Monday and a can of Coke on Friday. And all I can think about is, oh my God, I've screwed up because I had that bar of chocolate and I had that can of Coke, and oh, my diet's ruined.
yeah,
And we do this in other areas as well. You know, I've talked to a client the other day, and you're saying, I've done this, and this. And each one of the three things were negative things. Like
yeah,
I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And I had this really negative comment. And I said, look, take a step back, look at your entire week. Oh, yeah, that went really well. And that went really well. And that we just got, as humans, we have this propensity or this thing of seeking out the negative. And I'd love to know why we do that. Have you got any thoughts about why we do this, why we pick out and focus on the negative as opposed to the positive?
I believe we haven't mastered the skill of zooming out, because when I started learning about what this whole zooming out thing is all about, that's when I realized that I got to be a bit more kinder to myself. I was being better friends with myself. And I wasn't, all the inner critical voice is always going to be there. I suggest if you have one that is loud at the moment, give it a name rather than inner critical voice. But that's always going to be there. But we need to have a better conversation with ourselves. This is what I mean. It's like, if you had that can of Coke on a Friday night, you're like, okay, well, look, I had a can of Coke on a Friday night, and it's not like I have it every single day, and that's okay. Rest of my week is good. A lot of people don't speak to themselves in that way. It's like, oh my God,
Mm.
because they're judging. We judge ourselves so much, but we often say, oh, if so and so was here right now, they'd judge me so much, or I'm not going to share that I've eaten or binged on all of this over at the weekend, and things like that. So it's almost like they're hiding. It's almost like they're shameful and they feel guilty. But zooming out is a beautiful skill that a lot of the times a lot of people don't tend to do. And I educate clients on this a lot. It's like, look, just zoom out for a second. Let's just have a look at what we're dealing with here. This is what you're saying, but this is what your actions were. They don't match up. In fact, you're doing better than you think you are. That's what I mean, tracking, measuring, and zooming out. are two very good skills that I would encourage the listeners to really, really understand more, and really think about where they're not talking to themselves in the right way, where they're not giving themselves a little bit of love and support, because you're not going to get it from anywhere else. You're not going to call up your best friend and go, "Hey, I just had a can of Coke. I feel really guilty." We might do, but we need to nurture ourselves by ourselves, but learning that some of the skills of tracking and measuring and learning some of the stuff that we can do when we're zooming out.
Yeah. I
So
think this is one of the biggest negatives when people go on a diet, is that the focus is so intense that
yeah.
you're probably right. People do ring, oh my God, you know what? I've just killed my diet. I had a bar of chocolate, or I licked a flake in.
Lick to flake.
You know,
I cheated on myself.
yeah, I had a smell of a wrapped bar of chocolate, and that's it. I just screwed my diet. We do tend to punish ourselves, particularly when it comes to how we feel and how we look, and kind of body shape plays a lot of part in that, particularly with diet. Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier on, Shim, that you help people with IBS. Now, can you correct me about this? Is IBS something that you can get rid of and you don't actually have to live with it all the time, or are there kind of different levels of it?
IBS, there are different levels of it because some people can have severe IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, where they've got severe constipation or severe leaky gut, meaning diarrhea. But IBS is a condition that I think is a bit of a trash can diagnosis, because you got to understand and look at the history of the actual person first to understand what is irritating their bowels. Irritable bowel syndrome, it's the clues in the name. It's irritating the bowels. Okay, that's a symptom. So, what is actually irritating the bowel?
Hmm.
Is it something emotional? Is it something mental? Is it something physical? Is it all three? And this is the beauty of understanding the basics of health, because it's a masterclass that I'm actually running this evening, is how you can get rid of bloating and still enjoy the foods that you love eating. Because if you understand where your stress is coming from, if you really focus on getting good quality sleep, if you look at your blood sugars and you look at your foods, that is going to help with IBS. If you look at your environment, sometimes people don't realize that even having a smallest amount of mold growing in their bathroom that they're inhaling all of the time can actually have a detrimental effect on their health. A lot of the times, people are not drinking enough good quality water, which can irritate the bowels, because it's like, well, I need hydration. The large intestine functions on water from 5 a.m. in the morning. So, all of these things, and especially how we're moving. And I don't necessarily mean exercise, I mean, like, literally, how are you moving your body on a day to day basis? Are you going for walks? Are you maybe doing some stretching? Are you doing a bit of yoga, Pilates, or just simple breathing, deep breathing exercises can really, really help calm the nervous system down in order to calm the IBS down. There are so many different ways, but I'm part of many IBS groups on social media, and all of the times I see people just asking other people, anyone else taking this box of pills? What did your doctor recommend? What did your doctor recommend? And I'm like, the answer's not in the box of pills. The answer is actually tenfold. A lot of people think I just need to take this pill to sort out my IBS. But IBS, there's been some science behind it, some studies behind that, where they actually tested a group of men and women that were going through IBS, different levels. What they really noticed, that a lot of their problems were coming from their emotional well-being, things that were going on at home, things that were going on in their environment, their job, all of those things. So it's like, okay, is it really food then? Could we argue that it's different for everybody? But we kind of, the approach is like, you've got IBS, okay, you're in this box, and you take this pill. Come back in a month's time, And if you're still not feeling great, I'll give you Gaviscon, because this is exactly what happened to me a few years back.
I'm guessing then that if you've got really bad IBS, you want pain relief, you want comfort. So
Yeah.
reaching for the bottle of pills is the solution to treating the symptom. But much like the work I do, I'm guessing your work is okay, yeah, that's the dealing with the symptom, but it's not looking at the root cause. And I'm
Oh,
guessing from what you're saying, Shim, is that you kind of do a holistic
yeah.
zoom out of the
Yeah.
client and kind of look at that. Is that how you work with people?
Absolutely. We do a full sort of lifestyle client history. So we're looking back way back to, you know, what's going on, what happened when they were little children, for example, when they were a kid, and where they had any traumas going on there, any accidents, any issues that they were born with, for example, and how does that contribute to where they are right now, and looking at family history as well, because it could be hereditary, some aspects of some of the health problems. And then really looking at sort of the brain health assessment, and we look at metabolic assessment as well. So we kind of just tie in everything holistically together, and then start to connect the dots and going, ah, this is the missing piece here, or we need to look more deeply here or here or here. And I feel a lot of people, they do go to doctors, and I'm not dissing doctors at all, because they are taught in a certain way, and they are doing what they can, the best as they can, with the resources that they have. But a lot of people are often disheartened by their blood test results, as an example, when they have gut related issues. And a lot of key things on a blood test results is often overlooked, or often kind of labeled as, you're fine, it's satisfactory. And it's like, it's not. There's other numbers that don't lie in the test results. Um so yeah, it's just really important, doing your due diligence with gut health and particular symptoms, and conditions, and really looking at who can help you. There are many brilliant experts out there, that can really give you a fresh perspective, can give you, I always believe that there's always another way, 100%,
Mhm.
that nobody ever has to live with a condition. The condition is because you were basically in a dis-ease position. You're not at ease anymore, so there's a dis-ease going on with your body. How do we get it back to control, and how do we build that resilience, so that no matter what happens, setbacks, you can bounce forward even quicker.
So let's just assume for a second that you've got a client, you've done kind of the background,
Yeah.
not background checks, but you've done their background, you give them a holistic view of everything. Your recommendations, are they mainly behavioral changes and dietary changes, or there are any other kind of things that I mean, obviously you can't give specific examples, but generally speaking, are
Yeah.
there other things that you add into your kind of list of recommendations for a client apart from behavior
Yes.
and diet?
So there's diet changes, there's lifestyle changes, there's mindset changes, there's behavioral changes. Not all in one go, because I think that's very overwhelming,
Yeah.
but really drip feeding it throughout the process. So, I have a whole system called Stress to Success system, and this is basically the 7-step roadmap of really, really getting your basics, your foundational pieces of health to a good standard. And then we look at whether they need to go further into more testing, functional testing. So having a look at the nitty gritty of what's actually going on inside of their body, because sometimes symptoms improve when they look at their diet, look at their blood sugars, sleep, hydration, all of those things. But for some people, it may not always be the case, and that's when we know, I think there's something undetected going on in here, because there's still inflammation going on. So we need to understand what could this be, and there's different tests for that, that we kind of understand the patient first in order to figure out which test is best way to move forward with their health.
Yeah. I got one kind of last question in
Sure.
relation to this. Um, does the gut have anything to do with this thing called water retention, or is that something completely different?
Water retention. So water retention is a lot more to do with your sodium and potassium levels. And in particular, it's more to do with your cells. So Every single human body has over 37 trillion cells.
Mm.
That's more than a million and a billion. There's a lot. But every single cell has a battery called mitochondria. So it's our energy source. And then we have these pumps as well, sodium and potassium. Depending on our stress, depending on undetected infections and parasites that can cause a lot of alarm signals, and how our lifestyle is in general, those sodium and potassium levels can fluctuate quite a fair bit. So if we've got a lot of chronic stress going on, as opposed to acute meaning very short term, chronic meaning very long term,
Hmm.
and we've been in that lifestyle chain, not even chain, that lifestyle for a long time, 10, 20, 30 years, those little doors can either stay way too open or just closed off. And then sometimes that affects water retention. So we may get ankle swelling, we may get puffy faces, we may get blotchy skins and things like that. So this is where signal failures are happening
Hmm.
between one cell to the other. What normally should happen is think of someone dropping a pot of yogurt in a supermarket aisle. That's been dropped. So you think all the other workers, some signal's gone off. So it's like clean up in aisle 9. Someone goes and cleans it up, and everything's back to normal. It's been cleared up. The mess is, the debris is gone. That's what usually happens with the cells.
Hmm.
But when that doesn't happen, and the chronic illness stress switch is just on, what happens is cells don't really die off when they're supposed to. New cells build up on top of that, and that's where we start to get cancerous type of tissue and tumors. That's how it all starts to go a bit pear-shaped. That's where it's really important to have good amount of hydration. This all goes back to the foundational pieces of health that I explained earlier. There you go. Water, absolutely. So it's just yeah, like I said, Paul, like a lot of these things might seem complex or difficult to do even, but actually it's not. If we understand that this is what our body likes in terms of diet, food, sugars, all of those things, water, sleep, if 80% of the time you do that well, honestly, you'd be living in a very happy life. Happy
Brilliant.
head, happy life. So
That's the one. Happy head, happy life.
yeah.
You mentioned your masterclass you're running tonight. Do you run them on a regular basis, or what's the best way for people to kind of work with you?
So these IBS masterclasses, I've only run them 3 times because they just kept coming back by popular demand, to be honest. So it was something that myself and another gut expert decided to do a collaboration on.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure when we'll run the next one. It just depends on feedback. But there is a brilliant ebook that I created, which I sent to you, Paul, that a lot of people can access some really good information on how to go from stress to success. I think I've shared 3 very simple steps on stress, on sugar, and on stamina, and sleep as well. So it's just really, yeah, very informative ebook. And there's at the last page, there's different ways that you can connect with me if you wanted to know more or understand your health a little bit more as well. So
I'll put all that stuff in the show notes, folks.
yeah.
Any parting words of wisdom, Shim? What's one thing we could all do today that's dead easy, dead simple, that will help us improve our gut intuition?
Really listen to your body. And I think this happens with just taking a pause point. We have 24 hours in a day. There is nobody here that can not tell me that they don't have 60 seconds to themselves to literally just either stand there, close your eyes, or lie down and just really just take a deep breath and a pause point, because that is really going to help you understand, okay, where is my tension points? This is a bit like body scanning that I explain in my ebook as well. That's one thing. Listen, and then really learn what your body likes and doesn't like. It's not like every Tom, Dick, and Harry's body out there. Every single human body in this world is completely unique. So it's really important that you actually listen, you learn about your body, because that's what's going to carry you. And then live, like really live well. Because when you learn those 2 things, living just becomes even more fun. So
Brilliant, Shim. This has been a fascinating conversation. It's gone in a completely different tangent to what I expected, but thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Listen, but folks, I hope you really enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you at the next one. Bye now.